Good day to all the participants and panelists. We are delighted to have you join us in the webinar entitled Philippines Africa Bridging the Digital Divide in the Time of the Pandemic, Opportunities and Possible Dangers. This event is organized by the Department of Foreign Affairs Office of Middle East and African Affairs in partnership with the Foreign Service Institute and the Office of the Undersecretary for International Economic Relations. I'm Ovito, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. To officially open our webinar, may I call on Assistant Secretary Leslie J. Baha to deliver his opening remarks. Asik Baha, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and good morning or good evening to wherever you all are today. I thank you all for being part of this online discussion brought to you by the DFA and the Foreign Service Institute of the Philippines on the topic Philippines, Africa, Bridging the Digital Divide in the Time of Pandemic Opportunities and Possible Dangers. The timing of this webinar is appropriate. The Philippines, along with all the rest of the world, is facing the continued effects brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Various digital platforms such as Zoom, which we are using this afternoon, have become a substitute for face-to-face gatherings and forums such as this. At the same time, this opens an opportunity for us to expand to a more diverse audience than is usually expected to attend this kind of fora. For this, we are gratified by the response we have received from those attending this forum virtually. The title of this webinar is an examination of the opportunity presented by the current pandemic to delve deeper into the issue of the digital divide and how it affects the Philippines and Africa, and to find commonalities of experience which can be lessons for all of us. As a background, Africa has been for the longest time a peripheral component of Philippine foreign policy. The number of our overseas Filipinos in the continent are few in comparison, let's say, to the Middle East, and the number of Philippine embassies that dot the continent are far lesser than some of our ASEAN neighbors. A small amount of our economic activity is with Africa. That is no longer the case. The policy thrust of Secretary of Foreign Affairs Teodoro L. Locsin Jr. is therefore designed to enhance our engagement with Africa as the next bright spot for Philippine foreign policy and trade, driven by the realization that we have yet to top the second largest continent in the world, 54 countries and a population of about 1.3 billion people. A bloc of nations that carries substantial heft in the multilateral stage. As 2020 started, the Philippines was ready to embark on an ambitious program of engagement with Africa. We would have been opening another embassy in the continent in Addis Ababa, following the opening of one embassy in Morocco in December 2019. On trade, the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry was committed to reopen a Philippine Trade and Investment Center in Johannesburg in South Africa. That would have been the only trade office in the continent. High-level visits to various African countries were planned, as well as various bilateral engagements and more trade missions, similar to what was done with Ethiopia and Egypt in 2019. COVID-19 has greatly affected the Philippines and the African continent and have curbed our plans for this year. Yet, if anything, this pandemic has opened the possibilities of other areas of engagement and due to the similarities between the Philippines and Africa. I hope this webinar will become an opportunity for those in the public and private sector, as well as the academe, to think more closely about how we both can learn and help each other in these challenging times. Our two speakers are experts in their respective fields. Ambassador Joseph Angles is our ambassador to South Africa and other nearby countries, while Mr. Rey Lugtu, CEO of Workhorse Consulting, Philippines. I am confident that they will be able to impart the knowledge and wisdom which will enrich the discussion that we'll be having today. Thank you and have a good webinar.
Thank you very much, Asik Baha, for setting the table for our incoming discussions. Before I continue, may I remind the participants to key in your questions through the Q&A tab, which can be found at the lower middle portion of your screen. Now, without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. Ambassador Joseph Gerard B. Angeles is a career diplomat who joined the Philippine Foreign Service in 1992. He is a member of both the Philippine Bar and the New York Bar, USA. He finished his Bachelor of Laws, cum laude, at the Ateneo de Davao University and obtained his degree in BS Business Economics from the University of the Philippines in Diliman. Before his appointment as the Philippine Ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Angeles was the Senior Special Assistant at the Office of the Undersecretary for International Economic Relations and was the DFA's lead officer for APEC and WTO. Ambassador Angeles assumed as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the Republic of South Africa on August 21, 2014. He has concurrent jurisdiction over the Republic of Botswana, Kingdom of Lesotho, Republic of Mozambique, Republic of Namibia, Kingdom of Eswatini, Republic of Zambia, Republic of Mauritius, Republic of Madagascar, and Republic of Zimbabwe. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming our first speaker, Ambassador Joseph Gerard B. Angeles. Ambassador Angeles, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jovito. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank ASEC Leslie Baha for organizing this for us together with the FSI, as well as the Office of the Undersecretary for International Economic Affairs. Let me start by giving you a bird's eye view of my presentation. Do we have these slides, Jovito?
Yes, sir. We do have the slide. Let me just put them up for you. I guess this is one of the challenges of having this webinar. This is our inaugural webinar. For the participants, this is the first time that we're doing this. So thank you very much for your patience. And we have on screen your presentation. You may now proceed, Ambassador. Thank you.
Thank you, Jovito. Let's go to slide 2. So this is the bird's eye view of my presentation. First, I will examine the current trade between the Philippines and Africa, which is at very low levels right now. Second, I will discuss why Africa must harness international trade, especially in manufacturing, to address the welfare of its people. This is particularly important because of Africa's demographic realities. Third, I will discuss Africa's plan to create employment by utilizing 4IR, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which emphasizes new technology in manufacturing and engage in value chains within the African Continental Free Trade Area, or the African Continental FTA. Fourth, I will examine the current exports of the Philippines to South Africa, or rather to Africa. I will show that we are already exporting high technology manufacturing inputs to Africa, which places us as a provider for the African Continental Free Trade Area's manufacturing value chains. And fifth, I will end with a conclusion that the challenge for the Philippines is to identify new manufacturing industries and value chains within the African Continental FTA. Next slide, please. A logical starting point towards looking to the future is, of course, looking at where we are right now. For purposes of this presentation, I am going to talk about the countries in Southern Africa, which I cover. The other ambassadors of the African continent will, of course, have their own figures, but I am quite confident that the figures for Southern Africa reflects to a great degree the figures for the entire continent. This slide shows the very low trade that goes on between the Philippines and Southern Africa. Only trade with South Africa breaches the $100 million mark. South Africa is our 31st export destination. But please take a look at all the other countries. All of them are below the 100th rank as Philippine export destinations. With most of them, trade is practically negligible, most probably a few cargo containers every year. In fact, with 3 countries, Zambia, Botswana, and Namibia, we have no imports at all. In sum, current trade between the Philippines and Africa, or with Southern Africa at least, is negligible. If we exclude trade between the Philippines and South Africa as an outlier, then trade with Southern Africa is not only negligible, it approaches non-existent. When we see where we are right now between the Philippines and Africa, we begin to realize that seeking to enhance trade under a pandemic becomes a very ambitious task. If trade was so low during normal times, it becomes difficult to imagine how we can enhance trade under a climate of world economic recession caused by COVID-19. Next slide, please. Trade is usually measured in terms of dollars and volume. However, measuring trade in terms of money does not really give us a picture of how trade affects the lives of ordinary people. Thus, for this presentation, I will look at the effects of trade on human development, specifically the relationship between trade and the Human Development Index, or HDI. HDI is a summary measure in 3 key dimensions of human development, specifically 1, a long and healthy life, 2, education and knowledge, and 3, a decent standard of living. Please remember these 3 points: long and healthy life, education and knowledge, decent standard of living, as we go on to the next slide. Next slide, please. This slide shows the relationship of trade and HDI in ASEAN, as well as the relationship of HDI and trade for the SADC countries, the Southern African Development Community countries. These scatter diagrams show foreign trade as measured by net exports in the x-axis and HDI in the y-axis. The many dots that you see represent trade and the 3 dimensions of HDI, which is long and healthy life, education and knowledge, and decent standard of living. This is actually a regression analysis, but to simplify it, we can say that the relationship is strong if the dots are grouped closely towards each other and towards an imaginary line that averages the dots between the X and Y axis. We can also say that the relationship is strong if the imaginary line has a steep slope. In other words, the closer the dots are to each other and the steeper the imaginary average line is, then the stronger the relationship is. We can see from the scatter diagram of ASEAN on the left of the screen that the relationship between international trade and HDI is strong. In ASEAN, international trade strongly affects Human Development Index positively. Let us compare that to SADC on the right. We can see that in SADC, the relationship between international trade and HDI is weak. The trade and HDI dots are scattered to a great degree, and the imaginary average line is not very steep. This shows a weak relationship. What is the main reason for this difference? One of the main reasons is the nature of exports. In ASEAN, a substantial portion of exports are manufactures or inputs in value chains related to manufacturers. The manufacturing industry creates jobs, and this is why in ASEAN, international trade strongly affects HDI. In ASEAN, exports create jobs, which improve the Human Development Index. In SADC, on the other hand, a major component of exports continue to be in the extractive industries, like extraction of gold, copper, petroleum oil, and the like. Exports based on extractive industries benefit only a very few and do not create jobs. This is why in Africa, the relationship between international trade and human development is weak. Its current exports do not create jobs and have little effect on human development. Why is it important for Africa to harness international trade to improve its Human Development Index? It is because Africa is entering into what is called a demographic dividend. Next slide, please. Africa is entering a period described by enhanced demographic dividend. By 2030, Africa will have the largest workforce in the world. This graph shows you Africa's dependency ratio in the red line and Africa's fertility rate in the blue line. From very high fertility and dependency rates in the 1960s, Africa will see a steadily declining fertility rate. Because of the birth boom in the 60s and the 80s, as you can see in the graph, Africa's number of employable people in the current year, 2020, and thereafter will be much more than its dependent population. Employable people will be substantially more than infants, children, and older people combined. This is what we call the demographic dividend. In the coming years, there will be substantially more employable people in Africa than dependents. A demographic dividend is a double-edged sword. In East Asia, the demographic dividend was accompanied by an economic boom. East Asia's huge labor force was accompanied by a huge number of job opportunities in the manufacturing sector. This meant more productive people who were earning income and paying taxes to the government. Thus, the demographic dividend in East Asia resulted in an economic boom. Can Africa replicate this? It has to, because as I said, the demographic dividend is a double-edged sword. Africa has to provide jobs for the employable population, which is growing very fast. If not, growing unemployment in Africa will lead to political instability and increased crime in the continent. Militant organizations like ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and other extreme radical movements recruit from the unemployed, especially the younger unemployed population. Thus, Africa will have to address unemployment or face serious political instability. The way to create employment will be through a strong manufacturing sector, which is tuned into international trade. Next slide, please. The main avenue for Africa to harness international trade will be the African Continental Free Trade Area, or the AFCFTA. The agreement became effective in 2019, and trading under this agreement started this year, 2020. How important is the African Continental Free Trade Area? With 54 members, it is the second largest FTA in the world in terms of participants, second only to the WTO. The FTA will allow free access to commodities, goods and services across the continent. This will be done by requiring members to remove tariffs from 90% of goods. It is predicted to boost intra-African trade by 52% by 2022. And it will harness 4IR, or the fourth industrial revolution, to achieve its goals. How can the Philippines take advantage of this free trade area? We are already positioned strategically in terms of our exports to Africa. Next slide, please. "4IR, or the fourth industrial revolution, is characterized by the fusion of the digital, biological, and physical worlds, as well as the growing utilization of new technologies. How do Philippine exports fit into 4IR manufacturing? Currently, the top 5 exports of the Philippines to South Africa are the following. First, gearboxes. Second, other regulating and controlling instruments and apparatus. 3, parts of electronic machines and apparatus. 4, static converters. And 5, digital monolithic integrated circuits. What does this tell us? It reflects that our exports are not end products. Rather, our exports are inputs to manufacturing. Our exports to South Africa tell us that we are already supplying the manufacturing sector of South Africa. To take advantage of 4IR as Africa integrates into a common market, the Philippines must look for manufacturing chains or value chains in the African manufacturing sector, where our exports can be used as inputs. This way, as the African manufacturing industry grows with its free trade area, or the African Continental FTA, our trade with Africa will also grow with the trade of the region. Next slide, please. So, in conclusion, here are the main points of what we discussed today. Number 1, the current trade between the Philippines and Africa are at very low levels. Number 2, Africa must harness international trade, especially in manufacturing, to address human development, especially because of its demographic realities. Number 3, to create employment, Africa will go into 4IR manufacturing and engage in value chains within the African Continental Free Trade Area to create employment. Number 4, the Philippines is already exporting high technology manufacturing inputs to Africa. Number 5, the challenge for the Philippines is to identify new manufacturing industries and value chains within the African FTA, so that our trade with Africa will also grow with trade in the region. That ends my presentation, and I look forward to discussing with you in the Q&A portion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Angeles. Thank you for that. Once again, thank you for that informative presentation. I must say that I was reminded development is indeed multifaceted, and that trade is also interlinked with human development. To introduce our second speaker, and to provide a private sector perspective on the post-pandemic trends, let me introduce Mr. Rey Lugtu. Rey Lugtu is a veteran in the information and communications technology sector. He was previously the head of the solutions group of Microsoft Philippines and held senior posts at Globe Telecom, Samsung Philippines, and Emerson Network Power. Mr. Lugtu currently serves as the CEO of Hungry Workhorse Consulting Philippines. He is also a professorial lecturer in the MBA program of De La Salle University and an adjunct faculty at the Asian Institute of Management. He earned his MBA from the LSU, where he is also finishing his doctorate degree. Mr. Lugtu, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Hobby Vitor. So I'm happy to be here. Glad to share some insights. So I will talk about post-pandemic digital technology trends in the developing world. And let me stress the developing world, because in the developed world there are more advanced, digital technology trends that we can see. So my company is Hungry Workhorse. No, we are doing digital transformation and cultural transformation consulting in various organizations here and abroad. Now, COVID has been a biggest disruptor. In fact, it has disrupted the disruptor. Think about disruptions even with companies like Airbnb. Airbnb experienced 90% decline in their income and revenue. To think that Airbnb was a disruptor in the hospitality and hotel business. And we call this normal the digital normal. No? I published this article, only this last month, and we noted the changes. No? For example, Netflix has 15.8 million new subscribers, double its forecast. Amazon experienced 76% growth. Lazada experienced more than 50% growth in the Philippines. PLDT and Globe experienced 40% growth in internet traffic. And look at these technology companies, they experienced 50% growth in cloud computing utilization. And then lastly, favorite of everyone is Zoom. 300 million daily subscribers, 50% growth from previous year. This is the digital economy. This is the digital normal, which is the new normal. Now, I will cite 8 post-pandemic digital trends as a result of digital and digitization of the world. Many of these trends does not only involve digital, but also some aspects of different technologies. For example, number one trend is saying goodbye to your office. The virtual becomes real. We know for a fact now that almost everyone is working from home. It is now the new trend in business. And many organizations have realized various gains from this new way of working. Think about higher productivity and higher work-life balance with employees. And look at this figure, 300 million daily users of Zoom. So because of this trend, a lot of new technologies have been developed. So new technologies that relate to working from home. Look at these new top remote work startups that's been coming out. Employee engagement, like digital employee engagement, at homes, meeting schedulers. Virtual reality presentations are now becoming a common thing in many parts of the world. Team collaboration happening in Philippines as well. Video conferencing and telepresence robots. All of these new technologies will become common in developing countries like ours because of this pandemic. For example, this company, VR Direct. Let me show you a video. Let me share this again with the sound. VR Direct is one example of technology being applied now for presentation because we're not able to go out. There's innovations now on how to make presentations as real as possible. So VR or virtual reality will become common in developing countries like ours. Previously, it's already common in developed countries, but because of this pandemic, there are newer technologies being developed which are affordable to developing countries. The second trend is automation, leaping ahead. Now, automation is nothing new. It has been there for several decades, but automation has been in developing countries in the form of robotic process automation, or RPA. So look at this news item. So RPA, or robotic process automation, has seen huge adoption in all parts of the world. Now, RPA as a technology is a tool to automate many of the manual processes in organizations. So billions of processes now are being automated as we speak. Because of the pandemic, companies are looking for ways to make their operations efficient. So RPA as a technology is not expensive technology. In fact, it is affordable by even small organizations. So look at these examples of automation startups, not limited to robotic process automation. Even in agriculture, it's being automated now because, again, people cannot get out of their homes. So agriculture is one area where automation is happening. So look at these different automation tools, from satellite-based assessment to environment and soil monitoring to farming simulation. All of these are happening now. All right, so this is a video of what RPA is for the benefit of everyone.
RPA is the software technology that performs transactional activities in IT applications in the way a user would. All RPA applications have the following structure: a digital input of structured data, and a process logic based on rules, conditions, loops, etc. to act on the data received. A software robot has the great advantage of being much faster than a human when carrying out tasks. Let's see. And they don't get sick, don't take vacations, can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, can be replicated for greater speed, can work from any location, minimize risks as they are less prone to errors. The possibilities of RPA are practically endless since it can address any sequence of tasks. For example, it can open emails, log in applications, read databases, access files, perform calculations, fill out forms, etc. Therefore, the scope for technology is any department or sector that uses Office and IT applications. But not everything is bad for the worker. Now, employees can dedicate their time to generating added value for the company, focusing on problem solving, managing exceptions, developing strategy, creative improvements. RPA is becoming established as another technology to help companies achieve a successful digital transformation and remain competitive in the market. RPA.
All right, so that's RPA. That's trend number 2. Trend number 3, the doctor will see you now online. We have been seeing this now. So consultation with doctors are becoming online. Before, doctors are the most resistant in digitization. Now they are being forced to adopt digital. So the technology now that we will see in the near future will be telemedicine. So telehealth is going to be big in the developing economies, as forecasted by this consulting firm, Frost and Sullivan. So we're seeing this all over the world, including also in Philippines, where patients already consult with doctors online. The fourth trend is no borders, no walls. No. Data collaboration becomes huge. Again, because of the pandemic, doctors have been forced to collaborate to find a vaccine and a cure. So we have seen this. No? So all medical practitioners from many pharma companies are collaborating using the same data set and using common technologies. So collaboration with data is going to be the new norm in the coming years. And in fact, according to WHO, more than 150 countries are engaged in COVID-19 vaccine global access facility. All of these 150 countries are collaborating jointly, looking at common data using cloud technology and analytics to find a cure. But not only in health, also in education. Myself, being an educator, we have been collaborating with universities also abroad. So education has now embraced online collaboration with common data sets. Data and lesson plans and lectures are now being shared across the globe. So this, using cloud technology and some collaboration tools, this is definitely a trend in the near future. Number 5 trend, microbes beware. Innovation will wipe you out. So innovation is also fighting back to fight against microbes, viruses, and potential infections. Because of COVID-19, medicine, biotechnology has advanced by leaps and bounds. Look at this, number of innovations to fight against coronavirus. In many areas like medical equipment, even ventilators are now being innovated. One innovation is this company. So this company innovated on this new product called the germ trap or snood. So this is a new, a simple looking contraption, but it uses some technology, treatment for these germ trap to avoid infection. Another is this, the virus killer, solution using biotechnology.
Hi, this is John Medved with your Daily Dose. We know how important hygiene, washing your hands, social distancing is to prevent catching the COVID-19 virus. We also know that what we really need is a virus killer, something that will actually eradicate the virus once it's inside your body. Luckily, one of our companies, Sanotize, is working on just this product right now. They have a product based on nitric oxide, which is a well-known virus killer that kills all kinds of viruses and is being tested now on COVID-19. In fact, they're delivering a whole set of products that include mouthwash to gargle with in the morning, a nasal inhaler to spray during the day, and a nasal lavage at night, which will clear out your system and hopefully kill the virus. They're getting ready to start clinical trials with this set of products to help protect medical professionals who are daily being faced with onslaughts of this virus. Sanotize could be just what we're looking for, the virus killer we need. That's your Daily Dose.
So that's one example, Sanotize. Trend number 6, eat healthy. It will help you manage the next pandemic. Again, because of the global pandemic, people, organizations are looking for ways for employees, organization members, and the citizens to become healthy. A lot of innovations happening in this area. So in terms of food preparation, food technology, food deliveries, all of these are innovations that will be happening in the near future. So this is one example. A lot of innovations on food and food technology. Food technology in the areas of processing of food, servicing of food, and clever products in terms of delivering the products. The next trend is trend number 7. The new reality brings new cyber threats, the arrival of cyber pandemic. Now, because of the pandemic, these cyber criminals are on a prowl to look, to steal data from, those who leave their, premises, their offices, even hospitals, because everyone is focused on combating and avoiding the infection. These unscrupulous, people are stealing data. So this is now paving the way for innovations in cybersecurity. Now, cybersecurity technology is not new. A lot of new, established technologies to protect organizations from cyber threat. But a lot of new technologies are coming out because even WHO reported a 5-fold increase in cyber attacks as a result of the pandemic. So AI, artificial intelligence, is now being integrated into cybersecurity. If you think of AI, data being fed to an artificial intelligence, like those attacking AI will automatically prevent, even stop, and even uncover those cyber criminals. So artificial intelligence is being integrated now into cybersecurity technologies. Now, the 8th and last trend that we're seeing is the arrival of 5G mobile technology. Now, we are now in 4G. There's a lot of talk of slow internet in Philippines. Our mobile technology right now predominantly is 4G. So if you look at this, a comparison of 4G speed is 200 Mbps, right? So, but 5G is more than 1 gigabits per second, right? So we're talking about giga. So that's a huge jump from 4G. Now the telcos, Smart and Globe, have already launched their 5G. In the coming years, next year, there will be vigorous rollout of 5G because again of the call of people and the government to improve the internet access of people. So 5G is going to be a technology that will drive other developments. Now, in summary, as parting words, technology is fighting back to help us in this pandemic, as we have shown in these technology trends. But we will also see innovation flourishing post-COVID. Historically, every after crisis, innovation always flourishes. Right? So it's been noted in several historical accounts. For example, the financial crisis in ASEAN, which gave way to a lot of new technologies in blockchain. So we expect that innovation will flourish in the coming years post-COVID. That's my presentation, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lugtu. Thank you for that comprehensive presentation and for giving us a glimpse of what we could expect as we move towards the digital normal that you mentioned. We'll now move forward to the open forum. And as I mentioned, you can send in your questions through the Q&A tab, which can be found at the lower middle portion of your screens. We've actually received a number of questions. So let me just begin by directing the first question to Ambassador Angeles. Ambassador Angeles, may you share with us what is the current status of the Philippine policy on Africa, and how can we improve at least the relationship between Philippines Africa in terms of perception? So we're talking about how does the media or how does the citizens view each other? So you now have the floor to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jovito, for that question, and it's quite important. ASEC Leslie Baha started our conference by saying that Africa was the new new golden opportunity for Philippine diplomacy. He already mentioned that we are really looking towards Africa as a very active partner, not only in the political sphere, but also in the sphere of trade and cultural engagement. Now, ASEC Baha already mentioned several actions that we have taken before COVID-19 unfortunately put some activities on a slower lane. For example, let me talk about what we have done here in Southern Africa. In 2019, 2018 and 2019, we had so many business delegations coming from the Philippines to South Africa and Mozambique and other neighboring countries, and vice versa from these countries to the Philippines. And as a matter of fact, the trade minister of Mozambique was already scheduled to visit the Philippines upon the invitation of DTI Secretary Lopez. And that was about to happen, but unfortunately, like I said, COVID happened and we had to postpone that one. And also, as ASEC Baha already mentioned, the DTI is ready to establish an office of the trade attaché based in South Africa, which will take care of the trade opportunities in the African continent. This is a major step, since for a very long time, the African continent was just a subsidiary of the activities of the trade attaché based in Dubai. And of course, just the Middle East alone, that office was already extremely busy. So Africa was really relegated to a second tier in terms of importance for the DTI. But because of the representations of South Africa, as well as all the other ambassadors in the African continent, the DTI has finally agreed to establish a trade attaché for the African continent. This was supposed to happen this year. DIRCO, the DFA of South Africa, already agreed to the establishment. We were already going into the details of getting diplomatic passports, you know, the stuff that, the nitty-gritty of establishing an office. But then again, this was put on the slow lane by COVID-19. But definitely as soon as this pandemic ends and when it becomes feasible, then the establishment will go on full steam as planned. Another one is an MOU with Mauritius is already ready for signing. This was supposed to be signed by SFA during the UNGA in New York, which is earlier this year. Or it would have been signed by myself and the appropriate representative of Mauritius in an official call to be made myself in that country. Again, unfortunately, travel restrictions have behoved us to postpone this activity. And as OMEA knows, we were already scheduled to conduct a bilateral consultative forum with South Africa this year on a USEC level. This is already a very high level in terms of BCF. Our previous BCFs were ASEC level, which of course were quite important already. But an upgrade to USEC level, you know, it reflects the importance with which we see Africa as a partner. So this is where the Philippines is right now. This is our policy for Africa: stronger ties, greater liaisoning, and a strengthening of political, economic, and cultural relations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Angeles. Let me follow up on that question, and I think both of the panelists can answer this question. No? One of the inquiries raised was in terms of the comparative advantage of the Philippines. You alluded to both Africa continent and the Philippines moving amidst the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And you also mentioned the African trade agreement in the African continent. Now, can you share with us what are the industries or sectors that the Philippines or capitalize on so that we further these relationship? And for Mr. Lugtu, can you at least share with us as well what are the digital technologies that we could use to our advantage as we try to advance again or bridge at least the Philippines Africa digital divide. Gentlemen,
Ambassador?
If I may, Vito,
go ahead, sir.
with Mr. Lugtu's permission,
Yes.
we were talking about comparative advantage. What are the comparative advantages in Africa and what are the comparative advantages of the Philippines? I already mentioned the top exports of the Philippines to South Africa. Let me center on that because as I showed in my slides, the trade between the other countries is really negligible. It's very small. So let me focus on our trade with South Africa. As I already mentioned, our trade is not in finished products, but inputs to the manufacturing industry. Here in South Africa, they have factories for European vehicles. So they make Mercedes-Benzes here, they make Volkswagens. And if you look at these vehicles that are manufactured here in South Africa, you will see that there are many components that are made in the Philippines. So this is an important aspect of our trade in the coming African Continental Free Trade Area. Because what we see with the free trade area is that they will consist of value chains or manufacturing chains within the African continent. This is quite important because as we all know, there are many countries in Africa which do not have competitive advantage when it comes to finished products. They have very low technology, they have very low capital accumulation, and it is difficult for them to have a competitive advantage in a finished product. But if we talk about value chains or manufacturing chains, then this lowers the threshold for participating in international trade because a country who is less developed will be able to find a competitive edge, perhaps because it has a lower minimum wage than the other countries, perhaps because it has something that is more numerous, for example, than other countries. So in a value chain, it can look for a competitive advantage. So this is also where the Philippines is when it comes to the African Continental Free Trade Area. I think under the old normal, it was already very difficult for Philippine products, finished products, to enter into the African market. It's simply because of the Chinese trade. China really produces products in a more competitive manner than the Philippines can. But where is our competitive advantage when it comes to trade with Africa? It is in the inputs in the manufacturing industry. That is where our competitive advantage is. And that was the conclusion that I came up with, that in order for the Philippines to harness the new possibilities and opportunities brought about by the African Continental Free Trade Area, we must identify new manufacturing chains. We must identify value chains within the African continent within which we can play a part as a source of inputs to value chains.
All right.
Thank you, Ambassador Angeles. Mr. Lugtu?
Yes, no. So I agree with Ambassador Angeles. No. So manufacturing, in fact, no, there's a lot of good semiconductor components in automotive from the Philippines. I'm familiar with those companies. But apart from that, no, potential for export are into services as well. No? Philippines being capital BPO of the world, no? Have been upgrading. They have been implementing robotic process automation to become more efficient. And this is something that we can compete on, especially now many of the BPO companies have upgraded and automated many of their processes. And the employees, the BPO employees have also been upgrading their skills into data analytics. This is something that we can focus on Additionally, there was also mentioned here food technology. I think that's one area that Philippines can excel on. We are also big in food manufacturing, in agriculture. We can potentially find innovations. I have mentioned a number of innovation areas in food technology, especially in boosting resistance of individuals and citizens. Fortifying food with nutrition, processing food for longer shelf life. So, food technology and BPO are, I think, good prospects.
Jovito, can I just make a rejoinder to Mr. Lugtu's comment?
Go ahead,
I do
Ambassador.
agree with him. I do agree with Mr. Lugtu very strongly. During the trade missions from the Philippines to Southern Africa that happened late 2019, what Mr. Lugtu mentioned was really the Philippine products that were very strongly received in Southern Africa. Health products and cosmetics were strongly received. Medical technologies were very strongly received here in Southern Africa. Food supplements, health supplements like tea, like the other health supplements that are made in the Philippines were also very much welcomed by Southern African distributors. And also packing machineries for food, like Mr. Luktu said, was also a very strong category in that business delegation. So I would just like to say that I strongly agree with what Mr. Luktu has commented on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Angeles and Mr. Lugtu. Let me now ask this question. In terms of the trade complexity, we have different actors involved, we have different countries involved. How will the intensifying US-China trade war affect our capability to improve our digital capacity? Any thoughts?
I can probably put a stab there, Jovito. No? So with the U.S. trade war, no? So there is now a direction for countries operating in China to move outside of China. We have seen Japanese companies moving out of China as retaliation as well. No? So countries are in a way, quote unquote, retaliating against China's practices. Moving out of China, Japan has moved out many of its operations, and we, as a country with vast human resource, we should get a good slice of those manufacturing facilities. And if we do get those, and I heard that investment figures are good in the last months and quarters. So if we get those, then it will spur the development of technology. Imagine a transfer of modern technology, for example, Japanese technology being transferred to Philippines. That is going to be a big advantage for us Philippines, and it will build our digital technology capacity in order for us also to develop other products and services for internal use and for export as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lugtu. Ambassador Angeles, would you like to add something?
Well, I think Mr. Lugtu has covered it quite extensively. I agree with his comments.
Okay. Thank you, Ambassador Angeles. Let me now focus on another question. For Mr. Lugtu, you mentioned that the could help us amidst a time of pandemic. However, there have been issues in terms of the basic necessities. Majority of the Filipinos are forced to focus on providing for their own needs without a job. Now, how do we try to balance this dilemma? Moving towards the digital normal while still, of course, addressing our basic needs. How do we train the mindset, or how do we direct the perspective of the Filipinos towards the digital normal?
Okay, good question, Vito. We've done a lot of studies here, and I will cite one trend that I haven't mentioned. So with this pandemic, we are now officially in recession. And there's already news that 47% of the working adults lost their jobs. So almost half of the working adults do not have jobs. But a flip side of that, there's a tripling or quadrupling of new registered businesses online. So according to the reports from DTI, so Filipinos are adjusting, apparently. So moving into online business. Now the question is, I think Filipinos already are embracing this new normal and moving into digital. But I think the bigger question there is, how do we all make a living and competing in the same size of the pie? Because life is getting difficult now. One answer to that is a phenomenon we observed during the start of the pandemic in March is what we call community commerce, the rise of community commerce. So commerce now is vigorous within communities, within villages. And the evidence there are, there's a big rise of bartering. Everyone probably is aware of bartering, of marketplaces in Facebook, and Viber communities exchanging goods and services. There's a big rise. For some of my research, interviewing people, people selling online experience more than 200% growth in their business. So businesses, commerce will move from main cities, main malls, main industrial areas into communities. And big companies are adapting to this. Look at the big banks now, Philippine National Bank, Union Bank. They have adapted rolling bank on wheels. So banks now are moving into communities. Look at retail chains of Family Mart. Family Mart, because of the slow business in their stalls, they have moved to communities, setting up shop outside of communities and inside of communities. Big manufacturing companies have also been appointing resellers, community members as resellers. Individuals, with their cars and vehicles idle, they are now competing against Grab and those TNVS for delivery, half the price, by just using Viber to communicate to these drivers. So Filipinos are adjusting, apparently, to this new digital normal.
Thank you, Mr. Lugtu. Ambassador Angeles, would you like to share with us, in your interactions and in your observation, how are people in Africa coping up with the current pandemic?
Thank you very much for that question. And this also relates to your previous question about the challenges for Filipinos in this new normal, because most Africans also find themselves in this difficult situation. We are already talking about the digital age, technology, but the fact of the matter is, for example, here in Africa, education, basic education remains a challenge. In Africa, less than half of the population finished secondary education, or high school as we would call it in the Philippines. So that's a very important challenge. We cannot even talk about beginning a digital age if that is the population that we have, and that is the reality in Africa. There are technological challenges. There are no digital platforms, or if there are digital platforms, they are usually limited to the capitals. So it's still a very difficult path for Africa to enter into this digital age. And I think even more importantly, is that some basic needs have not yet even been addressed. I'm talking about, for example, infrastructure challenges, roads, bridges, transportation. We cannot talk about digital transformation without even addressing the more basic needs of infrastructure. And the reality is that here in Africa, these remain as very important challenges. Another aspect, another challenge, particularly in Africa, is the challenge of governance. There is a perception here in Africa that governance still adheres or still caters to a very limited circle of cohorts, and some policies are not really designed to make the economic transformation more equitable to the masses. That is a perception of governance here in Africa, and that remains a challenge. But I think because of these demographic realities that I mentioned earlier, we can hope that the direction of governance here in Africa will change because the demographic realities will require a more equitable economic reality for Africa.
Thank you, Ambassador Angeles. Let me follow that up with a question regarding digital diplomacy. You mentioned the demographic dividend. Many young people, and I would assume that many of them are interested, at least in learning different cultures. And as representative of the of the Republic of the Philippines to Africa, how do we need to invest more in terms of digital diplomacy directed towards our African population? And for Mr. Lugtu, my question would be on can you share with us what are the possible pathways towards the DFA's transformation, or at least reinvention of itself amidst the fourth industrial revolution? No, how can we capitalize? What are the key digital technology trends? Gentlemen.
So let me start with digital diplomacy. It is very important for us to engage in digital diplomacy, especially under the new realities. Before the pandemic, we in South Africa, and I am very sure that the other ambassadors in the African continent were doing this as well. We were deeply engaged in cultural engagements, in cultural diplomacy. So of course, our Independence Day celebrations were a very important pillar of our cultural diplomacy. And also our participation in ASEAN is another very strong pillar, because this was what we used to accomplish our cultural diplomacy efforts. But this pandemic has resulted in new realities, and the only way that we can reach our African audience now, as the pandemic continues to rage, is through digital platforms. And we have already done that. With the help of OSCR, with our home office, we have been quite successful in promoting Philippine culture via digital platforms. So we have engaged in social media. We have engaged in email blasts to Philcom, to the various chambers of commerce, to the various cultural organizations here in South Africa and our countries, in order to promote our culture, because definitely a stronger cultural linkage will result in stronger political and economic linkages. So in summary, digital diplomacy was already quite important before, and with the pandemic right now, it gains even more importance.
All right, thank you, Ambassador. To answer the second question, so in our practice of digital transformation, we consider 4 areas of digital transformation. One is operations. Another is your offering. What are you offering to your internal or external customers? The second is for your customers. If you're DFA, you have stakeholders around you, and then finally employees. So all of these aspects, you can employ digital transformation in all, or 1 or 2 or 3 of these aspects. But what's more important nowadays is really the priority of organizations now during the pandemic is communication. So the basics of communication across your stakeholders, within your employee base on organization members, is paramount. I've spoken to even private companies are having difficulty now. So having a good internet connection is the basic one. No? Having a good collaboration tool where you can collaborate. No? And this is no, not only communicating like talking, video conferences like this make the communication richer. The problem with remote communication is that it's not rich enough to communicate ideas, no? Communicate emotions and so on. So that's why it's important to make communications rich as possible in a digital environment like this. No? So that's the more urgent right now. And then potentially in the operations part, no, technology is inexpensive now. No? Unlike before, unlike years ago, it is getting to be inexpensive. Like robotic process automation. If you have mounds of paper and a lot of manual processes, you can potentially use robotic process automation as a very inexpensive alternative to automate many of the processes.
Thank you, Mr. Lugtu. Well, we seem to have tackled almost more than 20 questions that came in from our question and answer tab. Once again, thank you very much to the participants who sent in their questions. As much as we'd like to acknowledge or attribute the questions, we're following Chatham House rules. So for the sake of for the sake of espousing confidentiality, we address the questions in an anonymous manner. We hope you understand. Mr. Ambassador Angeles and Mr. Lugtu, I'll give you a minute or two to give your final thoughts for this webinar.
Thank you, Jovito. Let me just reiterate my thanks to OMEA, to FSI, to OWIR for organizing this event. It is really quite important for us to share our ideas. Africa has always been has not been in the forefront in our diplomacy, but under the leadership of Secretary Locsin, under the leadership of ASEC Baha, I think we are now in a new age of really looking at Africa as a main partner of the Philippines towards economic progress. And we are very happy here in South Africa, and I am sure that I share this sentiment with all our colleagues in the African continent. We are very happy to be a part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you,
All right.
Ambassador.
So likewise, I thank FSI for inviting me and sharing, some insights on digital technology and trends. And I wish, the department, all the, good graces, and we hope that we digitize as a country. I've been promoting digitization in the Philippines. We need this to have a more improved comparative advantage against other countries, and also to promote trade with other countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again, Ambassador Angeles and Mr. Lugtu. Let me just wrap up the session by emphasizing that from the discussions, from the presentations, I guess what we've learned so far is that in order for us to solve the Philippines-Africa digital divide, we must add efforts that focuses on human development, subtract our biases, and multiply our cooperation, our avenues of cooperation in order to solve the digital divide. Once again, thank you very much to the panelists, to the participants. We're delighted to have you for this afternoon's webinar, and we hope to see you in our future events. This is Jovito, signing off as your moderator. Have a great day.